Let me encourage you to be back at 5 o'clock this evening. We're studying the book of Romans. We've begun on Sunday nights. Jake Wesson is going to be discussing chapter 2 of the book of Romans tonight. Come back and join that study, if you will. As you notice on the slide, we're returning to our year's theme once again today, as we have 6 or 8 times so far this year, I think it has been. We're talking about being the good. Now, I saw something this week. It's along the lines, so I thought you may not have seen it, so I'll share it with you right quick. It's an eye test. You see the blue watermelon? Now read the sign. Red. If you see this watermelon is red, you're a normal person. If you see this watermelon is green, you're a bit odd. If you see this watermelon is blue, you need to volunteer at church. Talk about making things say what you want them to. But I sort of enjoyed that. As Randy read just a few moments ago, we're talking this morning from Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus teaches us to turn the other cheek. We all know it's easy to be good. It's easy to do good in an environment where good is acknowledged, good is rewarded, and where good is the practice of the day. The obvious application and the obvious challenge is to be the good in the face of evil. And so that's the direction we're going in this morning. Being the good in the face of evil. Being the good when good is not being done to you. Now, where Randy was reading out of verses 38 through 42 of Matthew chapter 5. Now, since you've heard that reading in the last few minutes, I want you to jump in with me the verse after that for the next paragraph. Verse 43 out of Matthew 5. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be the sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, sends rain on the just and on the unjust. And here's why I read the passage particularly. Verse 46. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? Jesus used that phrase in an interesting way in a couple of places. This is one of them. You remember when he gave the model prayer, when he's teaching his disciples how to pray. And he speaks of those who pray so that they can be heard. They pray loud and they pray on the street corners so that they can be heard. And Jesus said of them, he said, they have their reward. Now, a lot of people read that and they interpret that as they've got their reward coming. You know, they've got something coming for acting that way. I think in reality, what he's saying there is they are getting their reward. They really are getting their reward, because what they're doing is they're doing what they're doing so that they can be seen of other people. They are being seen of other people. That is their reward. Nothing else is coming. They have received their reward. Here in this context, he says, if you love those who love you, what reward is that? Are you expecting something for that? A lot of people do like I do with several friends. You know, you go out and you have lunch. You buy lunch. Next time you go out, the friend buys lunch. Next time you go out, you buy lunch. You know how it goes, back and forth, back and forth. You know, is it supposed to be a big deal? Thanks for lunch. Well, yeah, thanks for lunch. You bought this time, I'll buy next time. Reality is, it's not too impressive. It's not doing a great thing. Why don't we just buy our lunch, right? Plus, you know as well as I do, we all have friends who can't keep count. And if you're going to do that, you need to keep count, right? What Jesus is saying, you're not expecting any reward for loving people who love you. You're not expecting any reward for treating people well who treat you well. Are you supposed to get patted on the back for smiling at somebody who just smiled at you? No. That's the point being made in that statement. But earlier he said, verse 39 again, but I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now you hear of people occasionally, I had a discussion right after first service, about people who would apply that in an extreme situation. And I would suggest that it might be applied too extremely at times. What he's talking about here is personal relationships and personal interaction with people. This seems to be the way that it's handled throughout the New Testament. He said, if anybody slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Jesus, again in Luke chapter 6, Luke's rendition makes the same statement. Chapter 6 and verse 29 doesn't give us any different information. But there is an interesting passage back in the Old Testament. You see, this concept is not brand new here. This is not the first time we've heard something along these lines. It's Lamentations chapter 3. I'll begin in the spot where we know this passage very well. We sing it more than we read it these days, beginning in verse 22. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will trust in him. Then he continues, the Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good for one that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Let him sit alone in silence when it is laid upon him. Let him put his mouth in the dust, that there may be hope. Let him give his cheek to the one who strikes. Let him be filled with insults. The Lord will not cast off forever. So it's even an Old Testament concept, though maybe a little bit more obscure than the prominence that Jesus places on it here when he teaches us to turn the other cheek. Now the reality is, though, our natural, if you will, we tend to give back what people give to us. We tend to always give back what is given to us. Somebody says something a little snippy. Oh, it's very easy for us to be snippy back, right? Someone smiles, we smile. We give back to what people give to us. There is a name for it. It's called psychological reciprocity. It's the thing that happens in your mind that suggests that you ought to do what others have done for you. By definition, it means human beings are instinctively impelled to return what others give to us. Our natural reflex, I would say it's a fleshly reflex. It's not a spiritual reflex. Jesus is teaching a spiritual reflex. And we have to learn those. We have to get those to become habit in our lives. The fleshly reflex is that we give back what has been given to us. Is it not true for most of us, when an unkind word is spoken, the same tone with the same speed comes out of our mouth before it's hardly even registered that we're making a response? Now, if that's true of you, this is a greater challenge. It's true of many. It's hard to weigh. It's hard to make that decision in the moment until you get used to it, until you make a habit out of it. And I think that's what Jesus is asking us to do. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 23. The passages aren't coming up. We'll see what's the problem there later. Of Jesus it says, when he was reviled, he did not revile in return. 1 Peter 2:23. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. Jesus is our example on the cross, being crucified unjustly, obviously. When mean things, when hateful things are said, he does not return the hateful things. In his suffering, he does not threaten, and you know he could have threatened. You know, we sing the song, He could have called 10,000 angels. Yes, and a few other things. He could have done a lot. Maybe one of the greatest challenges of the cross was when they said to him, if you be the Son of God, come down from there, because you know it had to cross his mind. I could in a heartbeat. But he took it. Notice the reasoning why. The verse gives us the reason why. We sort of say it in passing at the end if we're not careful, rather than realizing how big a part it has in the verse. When he says he did not revile in return, when he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. He didn't do it because he's entrusting himself to his Father who is going to judge justly. Two things today about this. Two simple statements. Number one, what he's saying is do not return evil for evil. When evil comes to you, don't return evil back. Don't return the evil that is given. Dallas Willard, in his book, Renovation of the Heart. If you haven't read that book, Renovation of the Heart is one of those books. My list, I say it's one of 6 written in the last 20, 30, 40 years that you just should read. Everyone should read that book. It's significant. In that book, he makes this statement. He says, to accept with confidence in God that I do not immediately have to have my way releases me from the great pressure that anger and unforgiveness and the quote-unquote need to retaliate impose upon my life. You know, there is this worldly, fleshly, earthly need to retaliate. A need to give back what someone has given to us. And that's what Jesus is challenging. Willard says it well. To accept with confidence in God that I do not have to have my way. So freeing. It doesn't have to go my way. I don't have to have the last word. You say, but no, you don't have to have the last word. Not if you're going to represent Jesus in this world of ours. But he's right. It releases us from the great pressure that anger and unforgiveness and this sense of a need to retaliate imposes on our life. The sad thing about people who constantly keep score is they end up bitter people, and the only thing they know is the score. And when you see people that describes, they're sad people. You see, to not return evil for evil requires a heart that has been changed. And though many of us have been Christians for many years, we've not changed that about our heart. That need to retaliate, that reflex to say back what was said to me, to return evil for evil. It requires a heart that has been changed. And when the heart has been changed, then the natural reflex will change as well. Hopefully most of us, we may not have had the reflex settled in our minds and in our hearts that we will give good in return. But at least many of us, if not most of us, have got to where we at least have learned to pause and to think and to give thought before we respond when evil comes our way. And hopefully we're going to choose the right. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Verse 15 out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. uses this phrase yet again. See that no one repays anyone evil for evil, but always seek to do good to the one another and to everyone. I like the phrase there. I like the wording. He's pretty emphatic about it. Notice how he gets emphatic about it. He doesn't get emphatic with strong words. He gets emphatic with simple words. He says, see that no one repays anyone. What that takes away from us is that excuse of, well, you don't know what they said. If they had said to you what they said to me, then you would have done what I did. Well, you just don't understand. He says, see that no one repays anyone evil for evil. It's not how we operate. It's not like the person that we live for. But he says, seek to do good. Seek to do good to anyone, to one another, and to everyone. In a similar vein, but with a different slant on it, do not respond in kind. Because you've got to learn to respond differently if you're going to change a situation. You've got to learn to respond differently. Interesting little book. I think Townsley is the guy's name who wrote the book. And it's entitled, Do One Thing Different. Because the point that's being made in the book is that in most situations that we're not pleased with, most relationships that are not going well, you can significantly change the relationship by doing one thing differently. You don't have to change everything. You can often change one significant thing and change the relationship. You can change what's going on in the relationship by doing one thing differently. Returning evil for evil. We have to respond differently to change the situation. It's a word we hear a lot about these days. It gets thrown about quite a bit these days. It's the word de-escalation. There's escalation and there's de-escalation. Someone comes to you with an evil thought, with an evil word, with an evil intention. You respond to evil. What do? They come to you with double evil. You respond with double evil. They come to you with stronger words. You respond with stronger words. You're escalating the situation. It ends poorly. Every time. When we respond with good, we de-escalate. We take the wind out of the person's sails who would like to escalate. And the reality is, we can't consistently do this unless we operate from a different perspective. We're just simply operating from a different perspective. That's what our Lord calls us to do when he says turn the other cheek. A lot of times we slide by this verse and we get around this verse by saying, well, next time somebody actually slaps me, I'll see if I can turn the other cheek. There's a lot more than the slap, right? The slap comes in a lot of forms. It comes in the form of words, of innuendos, of looks. It comes in all sorts of ways. And we can't consistently change it until we consistently operate from a different perspective. Close with me in Romans chapter 12. The rest of the chapter hits on the theme. Begin with me in verse 17, though. Again, he makes the statement that we've been noticing. Repay no one evil for evil. You say, well, you don't know who this was. He said, repay no one evil for evil. But you don't know what they said. He said, repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. Let's do something good. Let's do good in the face of evil. Evil can't exist in the face of good. It withers, it dies, it runs for cover. Then notice verse 18. I love verse 18. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Now, if you take the middle phrase out of there, which grammatically you obviously can, if possible, live peaceably with all. Is it always possible to live peaceably with people? No. Because you only get to control you. You don't get to control the other person. So no, it's not always possible to live peaceable. So does he say then that when you can't live peaceably, well, you tried, it just didn't work? No, that's not what he said. Because what he said was very specific. You say, well, I can only control me. And he said, that's all I'm asking you to control, but I'm asking you to do that consistently. If possible, so far as depends on you, live peaceably with all. If you're not living peaceably with people, it's not your fault. If you're not living peaceably with people, it's because they have not allowed it to happen, not because you didn't allow it to happen. As far as your part, he says you live peaceably with everyone. The chapter continues, verse 19. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink, for by so doing you'll heap burning coals on his head. Notice that the answer here for the why is the same answer that Peter gave of why Jesus didn't threaten those from whom he suffered. Because he was entrusting himself to the one who judges righteously. In this context, it simply says, vengeance is not yours. Do not avenge yourself. It doesn't belong to you. It's not your job. Vengeance belongs to the Lord. The Lord will take care of things, and that's what the Lord has claimed throughout all of Scripture. You see, the point is, and that's what Dallas Willard is talking about, we're released from the need to retaliate. We're released from the need to and the reflex to be angry, because it's just not our job to make all of this right. God will make it right. It's my job to return good in the face of evil and leave all the making it right to God. Now you might say, well, boy, but it's hard to walk away. Yes, it is. Because you see, looking like Jesus in our interactions with people, it's not always the easiest thing to do. And then he concludes the chapter, Paul does in Romans chapter 12. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. What does it mean to be overcome by evil? I would suggest in this context, to be overcome by evil is to let evil make you respond with evil. To let that which is done to you, that is done from the standpoint of evil, engulf you and enthrall you and promote your responding the same way. And what God has always asked us to do is don't be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. Because it's only good that is going to overcome evil. And it is amazing what good does to evil when good meets evil face to face. That's the difference that God has called us to be. As we stand and sing this song of encouragement, if there are ways that you need to lay things before your church family this morning, if you need to lay things before your God this morning, whatever be your need, we'd invite you to come as we stand and as we sing, please.